What is up, everyone? Happy Friday, November 3rd, 2023. Boomer, how you doing today?
Doing great. November 3rd. There's less
November
than 2
3rd.
months left in the year.
Sheesh. I'm 3 days away from going on an epic end of year adventure too. So that's gonna be something else. How about you? Anything interesting coming up? You going on vacation this year?
I don't think so. Like I took quite a bit of time off last year. So this year has been kind of like I got to regain that vacation time at the Fiat mine that I used up
Ah,
last year.
yeah.
So we'll see. It's not too stressful at work, so maybe I'll take a couple of days, but I don't think I'll be going anywhere.
What are your favorite vacation places? Like you kind of like
Oh,
Mexico
wow.
sort of guy or Europe or
Wow. I don't think we've ever talked about this. I lived in
no?
Asia for 7 years.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I went to Boracay in the Philippines, which has since become a Bitcoin hotspot.
Yeah.
But I was there in 2007 or 2008, and I spent a couple of weeks there. So this was even before the white paper came out, and that place was awesome. Like
Yeah.
I still think about that place all the time. And now there's like some guy, I think he's American, he might be British. He moved there, and he's orange pilling the island. So you never know. Maybe retirement, that could be a place for retirement.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I can only imagine like that was one of my things last year. As I said, the circular economy thing is exploding. And I remember, like 2 years ago, it's all about El Zonte. And now it's like, wow, you have all these options on every single continent, basically.
Yep.
Boracay is definitely on my list for next year, whenever I have the time.
I've never seen a beach like that in my life. Like
Yeah,
I've been
it's like pearl sand.
these beaches that are supposed to be like the best beaches in the world, nothing compared to Boracay.
Hmm.
That was the nicest beach I've ever seen.
Well, I'm lucky. Next month, I'm doing El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Dominican Republic. So I
Wow.
got black sand beaches, I got white sand beaches, I got everything.
Yeah,
Speaking.
why don't you tell us about that? Tell us about your crowdfunding.
All
Like,
right, cool. All right, for sure. Speaking of which, sorry, I'm a little behind here on setting up some of the stuff for the stream. How do I do this? There we go. Speaking of which, yes, I'm doing a crowdfunding campaign. We are on the front page of Geyser here. We're the fastest funded campaign this week. Essentially, I'm going to be down in Peru starting December to film a short documentary about kind of 3 or 4 different individuals in different villages around Peru that have used Bitcoin in a way to basically get themselves sovereignty in a way that they couldn't really do with fiat. So one of the people that we're following is a baker, a shoemaker, not a candlestick maker next, but really, really interesting people from Peru who have leveraged Bitcoin as a tool essentially to help out their business, to create new savings for themselves, and really buy themselves sovereignty in areas where it is quite common to basically have a lot of the population either in abject poverty or just living off the government dole. And so I'm going down there for about a week. I'm doing it with the Bitcoin magazine host Isabella Santos, and yeah, so far so good. We're raising sats here. If you want to contribute, Geyser's weird. When you're logged into it, it just shows you your stats on your campaign. But if you go to Geyser Fund or you go to my Twitter or whatever, you want to help out, we're raising sats to do this completely by the community. If you're a Bitcoin company and you're watching this, you want to sponsor it, get a little ad in the video, just be a part of like helping out in the culture. Check it out. We got everything on there. We're giving away Bitcoin to people in Peru that are using it in circular economies. So yeah, it's going to be a blast. Thanks for reminding me of that, Boomer.
that's absolutely fantastic. And I don't know Isabella personally, but I've been following her content for a little while. She's really one of the rising stars, I think, in the Bitcoin media space. She's
Yeah.
just got such a great energy to her.
Mhm.
Like she's like a genuinely energetic, fiery person who's just an absolute natural at what she does. So I think that's a great fit with you. That's gonna be great. I think you guys are gonna do
Total natural.
amazing stuff.
She's been doing the on
She's a
camera
natural.
stuff like way longer than I have too. And her family's from Peru. Some people might not know I'm half Peruvian, but my Spanish is not great, but I'm working on it. Um, and yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think she moved away from Peru, when she was a teenager or before then, and she's gone back, but now she's going to have a chance to, be a part of this film, really looking at the rest of the country. And we're going to work also probably with another filmmaker from Peru as well. So I always, this is the great thing about Bitcoin is it just opens your eyes to all sorts of different parts of the world, because you're looking for like a circular economy
Yeah.
story, but you really learn so many other things when you visit these places. It's not just about how Bitcoin's being used. It's about like the history, the monetary history of certain countries, how the culture operates, their relations with the government. And so this documentary, it will be about Bitcoin and, Bitcoin as a tool, but it's ultimately so much more about individuals and finding sovereignty. So I'm super excited, and that should be, we're going to be filming it December. It should be done hopefully by like February, March of next year. So yeah,
fantastic. So everybody watching, go out there, support Julian, support Isabella. They're doing great work. So
super appreciate it.
any
All
idea of
right.
like when the release of the movie? Are you going to release it on YouTube, or is it going to
Yeah,
be?
it'll be on my channel. It's just the reason I'm doing a crowdfund for this one is it's just a bit expensive going down there, and then like inter-country travel is pretty nuts. And I'm also going to be working with an editor on this one, just because I cannot edit my own films anymore. I can, but I can't. It's just it just takes so long to do it. So working with an editor on this one, which will be interesting. All right, so we got a bunch of stories today. We're 5
Busy
minutes in,
week.
7 minutes in. We're gonna get to them. This was a crazy week.
Absolutely
Feds,
crazy.
FOMC week. Always something happening there.
And
Some
all at
really,
once. All
yeah.
at once. We were talking before the show for the people listening on the stream. And it was just like at the beginning of the week, it seemed like there was, there's always news. There's always economic and Bitcoin news all the time.
Mhm.
But it really started Wednesday. The floodgates kind of opened up, and it just seemed like one story after another and multiple stories per day. And it's been a wild week.
Fever
So,
pitch.
yeah.
Yeah, crazy week. But let's start it off with some just straight Bitcoin stuff. Real quick before we do that, a quick shout out from our sponsor, Beaver Bitcoin. They wonderfully support this show and a lot of other initiatives that I've worked on this channel. So if you want an easy way to dollar cost average, and come on, that's the best way to do it. Sailor's been doing it that way this whole time. Go check them out. This week's show is brought to you by Beaver Bitcoin. Dollar cost averaging is the most stress-free method to enter the Bitcoin space. And if you're looking for a simplified way of buying Bitcoin in Canada without needing to rely on a custodial exchange, Beaver Bitcoin is your best bet. Beaver Bitcoin lets you set up recurring Bitcoin purchases directly from your Canadian bank account and straight into a Bitcoin address that you control. It's like a savings account in a currency that you actually want, or a Netflix subscription that doesn't suck. And if you don't want to wait to stack sats, Beaver Bitcoin supports instant non-custodial Bitcoin buying via e-transfer as well. Give it a shot today at beaverbitcoin.com. I love it. This is a great thing about the Canadian companies too, is they can just have fun with being Canadian. Like Beaver Bitcoin, that's awesome. That's so
And Aubrey's
Canadian.
a great guy too. Like I had a chat with Aubrey a couple of months ago. And I just was really impressed with just integrity. Like just a great guy.
Yeah, Aubrey's amazing. Yeah, I gotta get him on the show sometime too. He's in a different time zone. I think he's in Spain or somewhere on the east to Europe side. All right. Without a ton of context, I want to show and share two clips today. The first one is from a Liberal MP. This is in the House of Commons in Canada. This is our version of the Congress, halls of Congress, Parliament, for Americans watching. This is, I don't know, what is Joel Lightbound's position, technically?
He's an MP. He's not in caucus, so
Okay.
he's an elected official. Like he represents a part in a place in Quebec, so a community in Quebec, and he was the chairman of a subcommittee on blockchain.
Okay, cool. Well, this is what he had to say on October 31st, 2008, commemorating that day.
Madam Speaker, today marks the 15th anniversary of Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper that gave birth to the Bitcoin network, a fully decentralized peer-to-peer and permissionless way to exchange value. In the words of Twitter founder Jack Dorsey, the Bitcoin white paper is one of the most seminal works of computer science in the last 30 years. It's poetry. In the words of SEC Chairman Gary Gensler, Satoshi's innovation potential to spur change is worth pursuing to lower economic rents and to promote economic inclusion. I couldn't agree more. In fact, over the last decade, we've seen Bitcoin empower the underbanked as well as those living in oppressive regimes. Women, for instance, who use Bitcoin all over the world to evade unjust restrictions on their financial freedoms. It's also helped thousands of families avoid the tragedy of currency debasement. Now, in full disclosure, Madam Speaker, while I do own Bitcoin, I'm not advocating for anyone to buy it, but for everyone to study it, progressives in particular, because after all, Bitcoin was born in the midst of the great financial crisis as an alternative to big banks' greed and the system that never failed to bail them out. It stands for a truly progressive ideal. So today, Madam Speaker, let me thank Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that may be, and wish a happy 15th anniversary to Bitcoin's white paper. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent. And then let's flip over to the American side. I'm not going to recap the whole story, but there was an article that came out, I think this week or last week, about how Bitcoin was being used for funding terrorist operations in the Middle East, Hamas. They cited a figure. A bunch of senators signed off on this paper that cited a figure of 90 million or something that turned out to be, like 1,000 to 10,000% exaggerated on the actual figure that was used to fund terrorism. And they were challenged on this. And this is how Elizabeth Warren, who's the big Bitcoin, anti-crypto head in the US, this is how she responds, essentially. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to just make sure that this, here we go.
Last year, you wrote that, quote, in their attempt to avoid being traced, illegal actors have adopted ever more sophisticated cryptocurrency technologies, such as non-custodial wallets. Last year.
So very sophisticated technologies like non-custodial wallets.
Yeah, the default.
Yeah. So there you go. There's our framing. We have in Canada, we're embracing and commemorating the advent of the white paper, talking about all the ideals that Bitcoin has brought into the world, and a real plea to progressives to really take a second look at this, which is interesting because I think even if you have like a very small understanding of Bitcoin, I think if you were to put it on a political spectrum, when you hear the word and you don't really know much about Bitcoin, you think libertarian. It's like anti-government tech, right? And so to make this plea in the halls of Parliament that it's a progressive technology, very different. And then you have Elizabeth Warren here, talking about how awful non-custodial wallets are. Boomer, what do you think about this? This is like a pretty massive
This MP has a little bit of a history of being against the grain a little bit, if you say, in the Liberal Party. So for the people, non-Canadians, listening in at home, the Liberal Party are the party in power. So Justin Trudeau's party. And this is an MP from his party. So this is a member of his party. But throughout the past couple of years of all the things that have happened here in Canada, this is one MP who's actually spoken up a few times about various things that's happened. He talked about division. He talked about how we need to be more inclusive when his boss was telling people that, if you're a trucker protesting in Ottawa, you're a racist. And this MP actually went out there and said, like, well, maybe we shouldn't be talking like that.
Yeah, he dissented. I remember that.
A little bit. Let's not give him too much credit. He did still vote for a lot of the things that a lot of people may or may not have liked. So he did toe the accompanying line many times, but he did at least speak up about it.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned a little bit earlier, he's the chair of the blockchain committee on Parliament. So the way it works in Canada is there are a bunch of committees that study a bunch of things. So before something goes into law, they have a group of politicians kind of get together and they sit in a room and they bring in experts to talk about them, and they get information, and then they write reports, and then eventually over time that kind of leads to laws and policies, and that kind of dictates where the country goes. So one of these committees is on blockchain technology, and he just happened to be the chair of this committee. There were liberals on this committee, there were conservatives, and there were NDP, like the left party. And I watched a lot of those meetings just because it's something that's very interesting to me. Like it's something that matters to me. And I was very impressed from the beginning with this MP's understanding of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
He knew the difference between an on-chain transaction and a Lightning transaction. He corrected people numerous times when they said things that didn't quite make sense. You know, they had a lot of NFT people on these committee meetings, and he would often, not in a rude way, but just highlight, like, actually, no, Bitcoin is different, and he would explain why. I wasn't expecting this, though. Like, I wasn't expecting this level of, look how cool this is. This is a liberal MP going up there and talking about the white paper in Parliament. And if you watch the video and you listen to the words, he hits on a lot of different points, a lot of really good points.
In 1 minute, too.
In 1 minute. And
Very
he nails them. And he nails them. And the guy next to him, who's also a liberal MP, is standing up and applauding. So that sends the signal that this Bitcoin thing might be making the rounds in Ottawa, and people might be talking about it. And I was very encouraged to see the engagement that this clip had on Twitter. Lots of views, lots of positive comments,
300,000,
and lots of very positive comments from people, from a lot of people that are very don't have the best of things to say about the Liberal Party in the past few years. And they were thanking this man for standing up in Parliament. So this is, to me, as a Canadian Bitcoiner, one of the most optimistic things that's happened in the past year.
Nice. Yeah, and just to wrap up on that note, two things. You sent me a video, and I'm not going to play it, but it was a campaign ad from the Liberals talking about how, you know, Pierre Poilievre gave everyone this advice to buy Bitcoin, and they were kind of harping on him for that. Number one, like we've talked about, I think that video before, but it's gonna bite them on the ass anyways. But it's interesting to see this like diversion between what, you know, the actual liberals who are in power are saying. There's still, you know, like Christopher Friedland and all that still talking smack about Bitcoin, Justin Trudeau making fun of it, whatever. But, you know, the people who have actually studied it from the same party, who understand it, are talking well about it. And then you have the political class, the advisors that make all the ads, which are like still putting out ads from a clip over a year old, where, you know, people are saying, oh, Bitcoin dropped, you know, 80%. You would have lost X amount of money, even though now it's like, you know, almost halfway back to all-time highs. They're going to be pumping out those ads probably when Bitcoin is at like 10% from all-time high. That's how out of the loop some of these advisors are, really.
You got to think that video was probably created months ago.
Yeah, and they're just putting it up now, which is weird.
And they're just putting it out now. And there is a little bit of a sunk cost fallacy here.
Yeah.
They spend X amount of time and X amount of money to create this ad, and they know that it's doesn't look very good for them with Bitcoin up 110%.
I really hope they didn't put a lot of money into making that ad, because I think I could have pushed that to one of my shorts editors who would do it for about $100. It's just,
well, there clicks. You go. Shout out to Kinetic Finance.
They must have really overpaid for that, and they were like, we gotta like put something out on Pierre today, and that's all they had in the chamber. So sucks for them. They look like idiots.
Well, the truth, what's the old proverb, right? There's three things that cannot be hidden forever: the sun, the moon, and the truth.
Yeah,
the truth is coming out. On this Bitcoin thing, and it's encouraging to see it on multiple sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
That's incredibly encouraging.
And one last thing on this too, American companies who are watching this video, I hope you can see what's going on here in Canada. Not only do you already know that we have a way better meetup culture than you guys do down south of the border, but we actually have better privacy laws in Canada than the US. While we also collect KYC data from all, you know, Bitcoin customer companies or whatever, we don't actually have to turn that over to the government, you know, by default, or unless there's like a really, really plausible, you know, reason to do it. So your users have better privacy laws up here by default. So you should have a Canadian wing in your company if you don't. But my other points, both parties now are seeming to come to an understanding a little bit more about what Bitcoin is, rather than the, you know, it's a lot more divisive down in the States. we got cheaper labor up here and a better talent pool in terms of developers as well. And yeah, if you're an American company, I think you see stuff like this and you got to think they're chasing me out a little bit down in the States. We're right across the border. This is where I would set up a Bitcoin company. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying. I'm sure there's complexities. You still have American customers got to deal with that. But
Yeah,
Canada's a pretty good place to have a Bitcoin company, in my opinion. And it's only getting better by the day.
We punch so far above our weight in the Bitcoin community, it's not even funny.
Yeah, not even funny. All right, give me 1 second here. I am streaming this to Noster, and someone was saying the other day that I might be missing some of the comments coming from Noster. So I'm trying to keep that going, but I can't quite see it. All good. Next story we're going to talk about is some jobs data, and particularly something you have a take on here. Too many tabs today. Here we go. There was a jobs number surprise. It was a little lower than what people expected this week or month. And I found this post on Zero Hedge, and I've talked about it on the show about how they're always doing these revisions to the job numbers, and they're always coming in like lower in the revisions. It's never higher. It's always one way. And there's two different surveys that they use to check job numbers, and they're usually really tightly correlated up until about 2020. But since the pandemic, and then especially starting in 2022, they've really diverged here, where the reported establishment survey numbers are much higher than the household survey. You know a little bit more about this stuff than I do, so I'm curious what your take on this is and how something like this is possible.
Okay, this is similar as it is in Canada. There are two surveys. One of them measures the employers and asks them how many people work for you, how many people do you have on payroll, and the other one focuses on the households. So it goes after the employee and says, like, do you have a job? How much are you working? How much do you get paid? In Canada, they're called the LFS, the Labor Force Survey, and the Survey of Employment and Payroll Hours. So similar, similar as in the US. Now, we're seeing the same thing in Canada, a very similar pattern in Canada where there is a divergence here, but there could be a reason that is not as nefarious as a lot of the Bitcoiners think. There's been a lot of layoffs over the past few years. The COVID layoffs, there were a lot. And a lot of these companies that laid off people were still paying employees severance packages or some deal, like some sort of benefit, even though they weren't working. So when they were calling the employers, they were asking how many people do you have working for you? And they would give them a number that would be, they might say 100. Well, and that's how many people they have on payroll. So then they would call the employees and they would ask them, do you have a job? And they would say no, even though they're being counted on one survey and then not counted on the other because of the difference between how the surveys work.
Right.
So over time, that should converge. These two surveys should converge.
They seem to be diverging like more than ever, though.
And that is a sign that more and more people are getting laid off.
Interesting. But then you have the unemployment data. And that's so my understanding of the unemployment data is the thing that always confused me about it is you're not counted if you're not looking for a job.
Correct.
If you're unemployed, not looking for a job, you're not counted in there.
Yes.
For the layman's, like, why would that be? Like, why would that not be included?
Because you're not included to be unemployed because you're not in the employment pool.
You're opting out of the workforce.
Exactly.
Right.
You're not included.
The whole concept of like a workforce is weird to me too.
It is weird. The participation rate. So it's called the participation rate, and it's something that every good economist should look at, as well as the employment rate. If you see that was the like one of the stats too, is like labor force participation is actually at pretty like historic lows, very low,
40-year lows or whatever.
Very low. Yeah. So that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
So rising employment rate, even rising employment numbers are
Mhm.
not necessarily good if you have a bunch, like in Canada, where we have an increasing population due to immigration. So you would expect to see more and more people working. But
Let
if
me
a
let me
bunch
ask
of
you something.
yeah,
How are immigrants calculated if they don't have permanent residency status or citizen status? How are they calculated in the employment rate?
I'm not sure. Like I think are they still surveyed? I would have to. I'm not quite sure. I would have to check.
Yeah, I'm curious on that because like I don't know how
They
long it
actually
takes.
might not be surveyed on the employee side, and they would be included in the employer side. So
Right.
if you were to call a farm, there's a farm up the street over here that hires a bunch of migrant workers. So when the firm is contacted by Statistics Canada and they said, how many employees do you have? They might say 100. But some of these people are migrant workers that won't be picked up in the household survey, won't be picked up in the LFS.
Right. So that could also explain a divergence as well.
Exactly.
Interesting. Interesting. You sent me this. You know a bit more about some of the data coming out of Canada specifically.
Yeah.
Unemployment rate is up to 5.7. I guess I haven't been watching Canada's unemployment rate, but it's like almost a whole 2 points higher than the American unemployment rate.
It usually
And
is.
is it okay? Okay. Is there any divergence that you're seeing in Canada's economy from the US from like an employment, I guess, basis?
It always is higher. Our unemployment numbers are generally higher, and there's a few reasons for that. The libertarian in me will tell you that it's because our social programs are better. So there's more incentive not to work. And that's partly true. Then there's also common sense things like Canada's cold and there's more seasonal work. So there's more opportunities for people to only work a few months of the year because they just can't work year round. And then there's a ton of other factors as well. But generally speaking, Canada's unemployment rate has always been higher than the US. There are times where it diverges, but not often. I can't remember a time where Canada was lower than US.
I don't know how, the different industries, if they have consistent trends or if it really varies each unemployment report. But some of the data from this was that retail trade lost a majority of the workers and manufacturing as well.
Yeah.
All in the middle of like the strikes and stuff going on. And then the sectors that gained the most were information, culture, and recreation, which almost seem
And
like
government
tourism sectors.
Yeah,
government work. Is there any other data you saw, monitoring some of the stuff this week that kind of stood out to you?
I mean, on the job side, maybe not. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Canada and the US pausing interest rates. Those were things, but
and that wasn't expected. Like summer of this year, we were still expecting another quarter point hike, into November. That's been pretty much pulled.
That's what caught my eye. The job stuff, what I really want to talk about too, at least coming from Canada, is the rhetoric coming from our media. There's very much an emphasis on trying to make things sound better than they actually are, even though they are being factual. Like that article that I sent you, if you read it, I detect no lie in that, unless there is some sort of lie somewhere in the data that I don't see. To me, they're reporting factually, but they're definitely painting things to be rosier than they actually are.
Well, that's the job of the state media, no? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's no surprise.
As I bite my tongue.
Yeah, that's no surprise.
But that's getting harder and harder to do.
Yeah.
Because I think people
remember last year how we had like 2 negative quarters of GDP growth? And they were like, that's not a recession, actually.
In the US, and
this agency has to say it is.
We just had it in Canada. We just had that in Canada. The number.
Have we had 2 consecutive quarters, or just the one came in soft?
2 quarters.
2. Okay,
soft.
so we
are.
And
if you look at those Canadian GDP numbers, man, something is fishy. I don't know. I don't accuse anybody of anything, but I look at those numbers and I just kind of
Canada's
question.
I
question.
I get it. That's why I'm going to Peru.
Yeah, definitely. And employment is a weird thing. I don't like looking at employment numbers just in a vacuum,
Yeah.
We all know this. You could have a job where you make $100,000 a year, good job, and you
Mhm.
get laid off, and then you have to take 2 part-time jobs where you're making $25,000 at each job. Well, if you look at employment data, that's actually a +1.
Mhm.
But are you better off? You're making half as much money.
Yeah.
You're making half as much money, but because you're working 2 jobs, you show up in the employment data as a plus. You're making the employment number look better.
Well, and one of the things that I don't look forward to, but will be interesting is that in a recession, when we have a lot of these like higher up white collar jobs that have layoffs, what the stats will be on the reemployment and what people's salaries will be at their new positions.
I think
You
we're
know,
starting to see it already. I really
we
do.
emerge out of these recessions with like usually a pretty big technological leap on some things, right? And like to have a layoff in the middle of like AI catching on and basically deflating the value of so many of these white collar jobs, it's going to be really rough for people. They're not going to be able to, in good times, you quit one job, you pick up another one for more salary. You have headhunters coming after you, offering you more. It's going to be really tough now with this, like all the jobs in tech, basically, deflating in value.
Have you
Pretty
seen the
hard.
clip from the South Park episode from this
Oh,
week? Or
I
last
watched that. Watch that this week if you haven't, guys. It's so funny. The Pandaverse, and it's all I love. It's all the plumbers and shit, and nobody can do anything. Yeah, I love
Where
that.
where Randy and his friends are picketing,
Yeah.
and they're like,
Yeah.
hire me, and some migrant worker in a pickup truck could be like, well, why do I need to hire you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're all useless. No, I
So
love that. Like South Park always hits the nail on the head. It's so true. Like we're so useless here. Hedge your life by having like a physical skill, because the androids are not going to be here for a while, and likely they won't have great motor skills compared to us. So you'll always have a
and
job where
always
you need something
learn,
physical.
always learn, and follow your
Always
passions.
learn.
And follow your
But
passion,
knowledge,
because
like knowledge skills are good, or like mental skills are good. But I think people really undervalue physical skills because they think I can do everything on my computer. I live in a city. Why do I need to know how to run like a bandsaw, to do plumbing, to do any of these like physical things, coaching, whatever? I always think you should have some physical skills that set you apart. Took me a while to catch on to that because I'm a very digital person, but yeah.
I agree. And as someone who doesn't have a whole lot of physical skills when it comes to like fixing things and stuff, I have a white collar job, and if I lose my job, I'm becoming a dog walker.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm doing.
Man, I love that. I love that. We're gonna do Dog Island. You're gonna dog walk your way up to Dog Island.
I'm gonna be the Bitcoin dog walker.
I love
Guaranteed.
it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Speaking of things that are dogs, but let's talk about the solar industry and the renewable industry. Now, we could go on a whole tangent on this for the whole show, but I like to talk about this stuff because if there's anything that goes against the laws of gravity in terms of a sector right now, it really is the renewable energy sector. This is, in my opinion, and I'm curious to hear yours. You have some inside baseball on this. Maybe you want to share, maybe you don't. I'll kind of go on my spiel on this first. So earlier this week, SolarEdge Technologies had an earnings report, and this is just like solar company making panels, getting involved in grid infrastructure upgrades and all these things. And this has got to be like one of the worst weekly charts I've ever seen. Like, look how many consecutive weeks. This is from 275 in July down to 75 today. And it's all on the back of essentially, you're seeing now a lot of these subsidies phase out, and these companies are just being exposed kind of like naked with no business model. And if you look at the entire solar sector here with like the TAN ETF, same story. This thing's been bleeding out. This is an ETF, a bunch of solar companies, down about 30-40% in the last few months. Lowest levels since the pandemic. These things had a massive rip, like everything did, for about a year after the pandemic. And they're retracing all of it. And, for the layman kind of watching this, like maybe you don't, it would make sense to invest in these companies because everything is moving to solar, everything's moving to renewables, but there's cracks in all of this. And money goes to where it's desired, but a few of these things are really showing themselves in Europe, where you have companies. I think you sent me this article here. I'll load it up here. Siemens Energy built, billions of dollars of wind turbines, only to find out that they had massive flaws in them, and they secured $15 billion in the German government to do it. And now they're going back and basically, I think the renewable energy companies remind me of the auto companies back in like 2008, 2009. It's like, these are so critical for, the future of our economy, creating so many jobs, all these things. We're first in line for the bailouts, like the airline companies during the pandemic as well. And
also
I think
incredibly intertwined with the political environment.
Yeah, very, very intertwined. A lot of, you
It's a
can get in
great
this to
great
like,
comparison with the auto companies. Great comparison.
yeah, a lot of the congressmen and all these people have massive investments in these companies as well, because they know exactly like when they're going to get their next subsidy, right? Like they're voting for these things in the budgets. It's kind of disgusting, but it's always like that in politics, right? Like they're going to invest their money in things that they have a say in. But what's happening is labor costs are skyrocketing. We know that physical labor costs everywhere, like the plumber and all that stuff. Like the demand for people with those skills is skyrocketing, engineers, and there's not enough of them coming out for all the demand that's placed on those people to build out this infrastructure. The costs are climbing, and they're given these basically just government budgets because the free market doesn't really want this stuff. They want oil, they want coal, they want things that work, that have a price that's projectionable. These companies, they make these promises. So Vattenfall, this is a Swedish renewable energy company, bids at a record low price, 37 pounds per megawatt hour, to win government support for a contract. But following a surge in global energy prices, said it would now need a significantly higher subsidy for its project to make financial sense. So you work in the government, you know how like these bids work. Sometimes it's whoever's the cheapest gets it. And so there is sometimes like a bit of a race to the bottom on all government projects, renewable energy, you name it, construction, whatever. But it's getting completely untenable now because you have all these companies in the UK and in Sweden and all that have bid, projections for what they think they can do energy prices at for the next few years. And they're not able to meet them for, God knows what reasons. And now in the middle of all this fiscal tightening, when the debt burden on these governments is getting higher and higher and higher, they're going through all these, non-discretionary spending items on budgets, and they're just, trimming tiny little pieces of fat. But one of the pieces of fat that they're trimming is subsidies for renewable energy companies.
For renewable energy, renewable energy projects that are years in the future, right? So you talked a lot about fiscal spending and fiscal tightening, and you're 1,000% right on that. Governments need to spend less money, and they're trying. At least some of them are. Interest rates are also very high compared to when these companies were flying high.
Yeah.
And a lot of these companies are leveraged to the gills.
Yeah, they have private market debt too, right?
Yep. Yeah. And they have investors, venture capital investors, who probably invested a ton of money back when money was cheap. And these investors are getting margin called somewhere else. And they're looking to unload to get liquidity anywhere they can. And because of these stocks now are publicly traded, when they got in, when they weren't, some SPAC somewhere, it's ugly. And I know you have a little bit of history in trading as well too. Can you put up that chart again, the weekly chart?
Yeah.
As a former trader, and again, never financial advice. Like we're just two guys here talking about stuff. Like we're not going to tell you what to do with your money. Do your own research. This is entertainment purposes only, educational purposes only, never financial advice. My opinion as a former trader, I wouldn't touch that chart with 100-foot pole and your money. Like that is an incredibly ugly chart. That chart looks like it still has further to go down to me.
Look, like this is a beauty. This is like a tight trading range for like 2 years with a very decisive breakdown. And it's hard to get back into that range unless, external forces apply.
That looks like a shit coin.
Yeah, that's pretty well. Shitcoins don't chill this much at the top.
Yeah, that's a long time at the top
They-
for a shitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean that's just charts, but a couple other things too. And this is like the dirty secret about the solar industry is there is so much really abusive labor that goes on, and I'm not gonna that's a whole show in of itself.
Yes.
But here, just like some perspective on this. So China is a massive producer of retail solar panels, the ones that you buy for your house. Not like they do quite a bit of like big scale industrial ones too, but if you're solar outfitting your house and you're buying solar panels off Amazon, they're coming from China. And all those solar panels, and I bought some, tons of them are made by they're made in this region called the Xinjiang region, which has a ton of the the Uyghurs in the forced labor concentration camps. So you're buying solar panels, they're getting made usually by people in forced labor. And so I mean that's bad, and I think the environmentalists they have to reckon with that, right? Because you can't be for saving the planets at the expense of human rights. That doesn't really it's not compatible. And so
and environmental degradation at the same
yeah,
time. So,
yeah, totally.
sure.
And the mining and all that too. That's another thing too. It's like the mining of the materials and all that and the waste it
Yes.
creates. Tons of waste.
The recycling, how difficult these things are to recycle.
But there is increasing pressure to start moving this stuff out of China and start producing it more ethically. And I think that's a good thing. Like if you're going to do it ethically. But again, just another factor that's going to increase the cost and all this. And then, at the end, the really crazy part is that I don't know how, these mandates will stick. Everything is adjustable. I heard the other day that, BC moved its no fossil fuel car sale target up by 5 years. So they're going to try and get off selling fossil fuel cars by 2035 in BC.
That's definitely one that I'm not going to talk about if my boss is listening to this.
Okay, cool.
No comment on that one.
No comment on that. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, it's wild. It's so swimming upstream. The market is not demanding these things. The only things that I have seen from the free market that have really demanded, a lot of development into these products are, number one, people who are into more off-grid living. Now it is so easy to set up your own sovereign energy. You do not need to be connected to the grid. And it's super easy to do this on your own now because all this stuff has just deflated immensely. So people like me benefit from this, but that's not for everyone. And then the other people who have really benefited from this, I think, are the people who are on the cutting edge of where the electric cars are going, which is autonomous driving and the Teslas and all that. But all these other companies, they're in it for the subsidy because they can make these things at an okay margin. And I don't think that they honestly
Warren Buffett himself said it. Warren Buffett
said it. The GMs of the world, if that subsidy is not there, they don't want to move away from fossil fuels. And I don't think the consumer ultimately does too, by and large.
The consumer doesn't care. The consumer wants reliable electricity.
Yeah.
That's what the consumer wants.
They want a reliable car. And it's the electric cars, they're just wild. The infrastructure is not there yet. I think a good business to get into if you're going to touch this space is probably the charging infrastructure, because that's just a must. I think those guys, I've done videos for those companies. Those guys are eating pretty well because they don't have to take care of everything in the back end. They're just installing the machines that convert the electricity, and they get a nice little take out of that. I think those guys want
reliable energy, right? We all need reliable energy. Period.
Yeah.
And I'm pro renewables, more than most. I think that there's a place for them, but they're not. You can't force them.
No,
it doesn't make sense to put a solar panel farm, if that's what they're called, in northern Ontario.
I agree.
Where it snows all the time and there's no sun in the winter because it's dark at 3 p.m. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to put windmills in a place that doesn't have a lot of wind.
Or has too much wind, or has too much wind. I mean, that's so common.
Well, too much wind. Now we can talk about Bitcoin mining, and now we can talk about that type of stuff.
Well, now not on this show. I don't have a ton of time. I want to wrap this up real quick because I get no energy expert by a mile, but I see sources on things. I'm a huge nuclear proponent.
Yes.
Where it can be done.
Yes.
This came out of Bank of America this week, and there's community notes on it, so maybe I'm wrong. So we'll follow up after the case. This is, everyone says like the reason that we don't pursue more nuclear, besides the whole safety thing, is ultimately it's just more expensive. The ROI isn't there. So this is data.
Yeah, but why is it more expensive? It's more expensive because governments have made it more expensive.
Yeah, this is data though out of Bank of America. Industry research suggests that after accounting for efficiency, storage needs, the cost of transmission, and other broad system costs, nuclear power plants are one of the least expensive sources of energy. This chart says it all. Look at that. Dollars per megawatt hour. Half of what solar and battery is. Half, basically, of what wind and battery is.
Do you know who Eric Townsend is?
No, I don't.
No, he's a macroeconomist. He was recently on George Gammon's podcast. Townsend is very similar to Lynn Alden, like that type of macroeconomist into energy. And he has a YouTube series. I think there's 7 episodes about the energy crisis. And he lays it out really well. And the last 3 episodes of this web series is all about nuclear energy. So
Eric Townsend is his name? Okay.
Yeah. I can send you. I'll send you the link, or just energy crisis transition, I think, is the name of the series. Half of the episodes are about nuclear energy because it is the answer. Nuclear is the answer, and nuclear has been shit on by both sides of the political spectrum for the past 40 years, 50 years. The right, who have influence in oil and natural gas, they don't want nuclear to succeed.
Their stocks.
Yeah, they don't want it. And then the left are scared shitless of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, and they're talking about the humanitarian side. So they're getting it both ways. And
well, it's like you just need some really well-crafted propaganda, because it's like, okay, everyone who has the oil stocks.
This is next level. The nuclear stuff is next level propaganda.
Yeah. But this is what I'm saying is, like, you just need better champions of this stuff, and they'll come. Like, you're seeing a lot of like the scrappy politicians. RFK is really backwards on nuclear for some reason, but like Vivek and some of these guys, it's about like, okay, everyone investing in the oil industry. Everyone investing in the oil industry, just buy a couple like uranium stocks, and then you'll have your shit hedged, so you don't have to worry about it. And then everyone on the left, read a book and actually learn about where the nuclear waste is going, and look at the actual numbers on how many deaths are caused in a nuclear plant over 100 years versus a solar plant. It's pretty obvious, and it only gets more efficient and safer over time with nuclear stuff. And you can see the trajectory and all that stuff. Nuclear safety is getting safer than any other energy source, plant.
It's the most obvious. It's the most obvious solution to a very complicated problem.
Yeah.
Build more nuclear.
Yep. And you know what? It's going to be hard to do it without fiat. I really think so. When you have all this fiat and you have all this cheap credit.
Ryan, you in the chat? Where's Ryan? Nuclear Bitcoiner.
You have all this cheap credit and fiat, man. And you can borrow at 0% to build like a 30-year project.
You can't borrow at 0% anymore.
Not anymore.
Small
you really blew
reactors,
it. Now it's going to be different. Now it's going to be different to get the ROI right. But who knows? Never know. Maybe we get some yield curve control and everything works out.
I was saying this earlier today. Like at my fiat job, I was talking to my coworker, and I said, like, I'm passionate about like 3 things in this world, maybe 4. Bitcoin, passionate about Bitcoin. I'm passionate about buying food directly from my farmer.
And dogs.
And nuclear energy.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if it's that order. It's like, Bitcoin, dogs, nuclear, food. I guess it's that order. Yeah, like I'll talk anybody's ear off about nuclear energy. Like anybody.
Yeah. We get to have Ryan on the show. I've talked to him. He's an awesome guy.
Get his wife on the show too. His wife's no joke either. Like she's a hardcore Bitcoiner too. Like they're great.
Maybe when I get back for Christmas, we'll do some like more just like fun interviewee stuff instead of like the news, because nothing even happens in December anyways. So be a good time.
Ryan and I are supposed to do a road trip together. Like Ryan's a good friend of mine. Like I consider him like one of the real friends that I've met in Bitcoin. Like we're supposed to do and he doesn't live that far away from me. So we've been talking about like maybe doing a road trip to Toronto to go to Joey's place to do a live Canadian Bitcoin podcast recording. So, yeah, I'm representing.
I love it. Okay, last story. We're doing pretty well here. Let's see if we can wrap this one under 10 minutes. This is the title of the video, the thumbnail of the day that you guys have all been waiting for. The Fed is threatening to sue Bitcoin Magazine for making merchandise and for using the FedNow name, which is their new payment system, their instant settlement system, not a CBDC, but has CBDC-like qualities. Using that, making their own merch. And yeah, we talked about this. You're skeptical. You think this whole thing is like a plant, a setup. You don't think it's legit.
I'm not sure.
Not sure. Skeptical of it. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But I look at it like, even if it is fake, it's a win-win for Bitcoin Magazine. So the Federal Reserve sends a cease and desist letter to Bitcoin Magazine, saying like, we're Council of Federal Reserve. You're using the FedNow name, and we don't believe that, it falls under free speech or parody rights or anything like that. To resolve this matter, we request that Bitcoin Magazine permanently and immediately cease and desist using the FedNow mark and any other marks, names, or designations that are similar to the FedNow mark, including but not limited to any use on apparel or any items that Bitcoin Magazine or any of its affiliates place for sale, either privately or publicly, and then a couple other things. And it's like, you can kind of see, they've done a couple quick things. Bitcoin Magazine has an amazing response. I'm not going to get into it, but I like to think about this stuff as like a person in media. And it's like, okay, there's two outcomes here. Either they sent the cease and desist and they're just never going to follow up on it again, which is great because Bitcoin Magazine's just done a ton of sales of their FedNow merch line. It's probably all sold out. I'd probably grab something quick if you like this. And it's a 1 week story. They don't follow up. Nothing happens. The second outcome is they actually try and take Bitcoin Magazine to court over making merchandise, of which they have absolutely no case for at all. Like, I mean, come on.
Doesn't what's the old saying, right? The first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
Okay, like is
this what you had in mind when it was like they fight you?
I really like that saying. I really like that saying. But
is this the best they got? Is this it?
I don't think this is like part of a broader. I don't think this is part of a broader attempt to censor. I think this is just legal counsel that works for the Fed that has no idea what they're doing. To me, this is more a story, and maybe that falls into what you're saying. It's more a story of like complete Fed incompetency rather than.
Do you think Jay Powell saw this? Do you think Jay Powell had to sign off on it? No.
Not at all.
No, like
this is, I don't think this is the beginning of like a larger war that the Fed is gonna take on Bitcoin. I mean, they've already started a war a while back, and he says what he says about it. But I don't know, man. It's wild. It's such a win for them, though. I honestly think like all that merch now. I gotta go on their website. To me, I see a story like this, and also like any good media company, as soon as something like this happens to you, what do? You double the F down. And now it's like all of their, website, their banner.
Of course.
Double
guys
down.
Listening at home, check out their website. And while you're there, search for me in the search. Just go put Boomer. I'm a contributor for Bitcoin Magazine. At least I used to be. A couple of articles there.
Well, look, Milei's in the lead.
Yeah. I mean, I have a couple of contacts over there at Bitcoin Magazine, and I suppose I could see how legit all this is, but like, this seems like noise to me. Like this is just.
I love it though.
Noise.
I love it though. That's the one thing I keep saying over and over is, by our own initiative or not, we need to get into the zeitgeist in the conversation. And this is one of those stories that will. If it actually materializes, it will reach out to people outside the Bitcoin space. Like, oh, the Federal Reserve is suing a Bitcoiner magazine, and then people read the magazine, and then people, figure out what FedNow is, and then people learn about what CBDCs are. Like, the Federal Reserve doesn't just to get a cease and desist from the Federal Reserve is rare, if ever. I don't know if they've ever issued anything like that.
I doubt this is probably pretty uncommon.
Yeah.
Like, how many people make fun of the Federal Reserve?
Everyone, dude.
Probably a lot of people. Right? But how many people make merch off it?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, and I think that's why it's interesting, is like, I guess they're big enough to be bothered, right? I mean, the fact they have a legal counsel, they've been around for a while, they've done a lot of stuff, right? They could come after me for crapping on them. I don't have a legal counsel. I'll just like say I'm in Canada and tough luck, right?
Joe
But
Calasari, hit us up.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
don't
I
want to
don't
touch
know.
on, you don't want to touch on Sam just briefly. We got a few
Oh
minutes.
yeah. Well,
I don't have
an
much to add
article.
about the Fed now. But let's talk about like Sam.
Okay, Sam Bankman-Fried. I want to wrap this under an hour. We got 4 minutes.
We got 4 minutes.
Sam Bankman-Fried, under unanimous decision by the jury after presenting total non-arguments in his court case, has been declared as guilty on all 7 cases. Now, they haven't given him an official sentencing length yet. He actually has a second trial, apparently, too.
Yeah.
His sentencing is on the 28th of March, but it looks like 115 years, which I jokingly tweeted out, oh, that means he'll get out at the end of the last halving, basically. So
does anybody out there think he's going to serve more than 15 years? Please,
yeah, I think
please
so.
hit me up. Please hit me up if you think this guy
Why
is going
why
to
do you
serve
think
more than
why do
15
you think
years.
this guy would get any less time than Bernie Madoff? I guess that's the question. Like, this is a much bigger crime. I think he was convicted on more counts. Bernie Madoff pleaded guilty to his. I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried like fought this tooth and nail.
And Madoff was pretty well connected in the political goings as well.
Yeah,
it's a good point. Good point. But reading the tea leaves, I was trader during the Madoff thing. That was right at the peak of the financial crisis, where the mysterious they were really looking for a villain. And Madoff was the perfect villain to blame. So they threw everything they had at him. I see how the media covered Sam Bankman-Fried over the past few months, and
I know
they handled it was how they covered him.
Yeah,
including the picture. You see that sketch of him?
That's fake. That's fake.
That's
the one where he looks like a Chad. That's not real.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm glad it's fake. I don't know anymore.
That's the thing, though, is like you have to verify a lot of this stuff, because I saw that and I was like, okay, this is another example. But that's you're right. Like, it comes from a place of
the
truth.
The
media was fawning over him.
The Michael Lewis stuff. He was
singing
his praises. Like
yeah. It's wild. Like but what I really think, though, is I there's very few people that backed him that didn't in one way or another get funding from him. And that funding's gone. It's like Michael Lewis is never going to be honest about it. That guy got paid to do that book. There's no way that he was like, oh yeah, I'll just have access. No, that guy was paid by Sam to have that much access. Like, do you think he wanted to be around Sam 24/7 for 2 years? No, he probably had some other stuff to do. Didn't need to be there for that long to write a book on him. Right. He was paid to be there. It's all part of Sam's image. He paid billions of dollars to celebrities to prop up his image, and he paid Michael Lewis millions to have the inside scoop on his book. And he paid him off millions to write a positive appraisal. And Michael Lewis is no financial analyst, didn't bother to do any research on Sam's crimes, and just took everything from him at his word. But I'm telling you, like, all those people they're drying up, and they're basically gone now. Sam probably has like a dead man's switch for some Bitcoin that he stashed away for himself, but that's it, right?
15 years. So you think he serves more than 15 years?
100%. I guess we'll check back in 15 years.
Can we make a bet on this? Can we make a bet like
Sure. 100,000 sats, 100,000
sats. And we need to wait 15 years. So
okay, 100,000 sats in the year.
And Julie and I are both really bullish on Bitcoin. So
yeah,
100,000 sats doesn't sound like a lot of money right now, but this is 15 years from now.
2038.
Yeah.
November 3rd, 2038. If he's still in jail.
This could be a massive amount of money.
It has to be 15 years from his sentencing. So we'll see. If by 2038 it looks like he will get out within 15 years of the day that he goes to prison, you get your 100,000 sats. If not, I get them, and that'll be generational wealth. But all right, let's wrap it up. We got 20 seconds on the clock. Make it a quick
Something
outro.
I'm positive about.
What are you positive about?
I did for 2 weeks in a row now. I've done a virtual meetup with a bunch of guys from Pennsylvania and Ohio.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if you Rock Paper Bitcoin, the podcast Rock Paper Bitcoin. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. It's one of the smaller little Bitcoin podcasts out there with a couple of really smart dudes that run this podcast, Business Cat and Fundamentals. And Fundamentals, his real name is Paul. He invited me to just attend his virtual meetup that he does. And I've done it 2 weeks in a row now, and super high signal. So I'm super positive about in-person meetups, which I talk about all the time, but I'm also really bullish on like virtual meetups. Like that's really, really cool.
So just like a Zoom call or what?
Yeah. Just
Nice.
a Zoom call. And I think I'm one of the youngest guys there. There's like one other guy is around 40, and the rest of the guys that have showed up for the past 2 weeks are in their 40s or maybe even older. So it's definitely an older crowd of guys that are just really into Bitcoin, and it's fantastic. Super high signal stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, our Vancouver meetup group, we're doing it monthly, and now it's kind of like a little bit more scattered, but hopefully in the new year it'll be back to monthly. I'm so looking forward to. I find every time that you meet someone who's not a Bitcoiner, you have a chance to adapt and listen to them and speak about Bitcoin in a way that appeals to them. So whether it's through, here's why Bitcoin's a progressive technology, here's why it's like a sovereign individual technology, here's why it helps minorities, here's how it preserves your wealth. Like there's always a different angle when you're explaining to someone for the first time. Yeah. I'm excited. I feel like I've sharpened a little bit my pitch, and it's going to be fun to go at it in the next market and really hopefully sell better than I did in the last market. Because I think if I was really good at selling Bitcoin for all the years I've been doing this, all my friends would have it. And most of them do, but not all of them. And so that's the goal, right? Got to get everyone on the boat.
Well, we can make the boat available. We can't force them on.
Can't force them on.
We got to be there.
But we have to take accountability, I think, for why some of our friends aren't orange pilled. I understand it's ultimately your choice to decide whether or not you want to understand Bitcoin, but we can't think that I explained it the best possible way I explained it, and if he didn't buy it, he's an idiot or she's an idiot. No, there's always room to improve.
Always,
and
yes.
To become a more persuasive person is something that I think everyone should, aspire to be more persuasive.
Sharpen your sword. Sharpen your sword.
Try again. People don't want to take you up. That's fine. But it becomes a little easier every time too, when the price keeps making new all-time highs after they thought they were right about it for so long. People break every cycle their barrier against Bitcoin. So yeah. All right.
Without next week you'll be in El Salvador, right?
I'm gone. I'm in El Salvador if anyone's there. I'm also going to be gone the next week, but maybe later in November, I'm going to be in Dominican Republic chilling out for a week. We could do a show.
So we won't be doing this next week, I assume.
2 weeks, no shows.
2 weeks. Yeah. So guys, if you're listening into this, if you're still around, first of all, thank you. If you've made it this far, like over an hour, we're not going to have the show next week. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to host Green Candle's Bitcoin Twitter space at this time.
Oh, awesome.
So for everybody that usually tunes in live, just follow me on Twitter. That's why I put my Twitter handle here. Yeah, follow me on Twitter at around 4 o'clock. I'll start a Bitcoin space, and you guys can hop in and listen, ask some questions. So that's where I'll be probably the next 2 weeks, because I believe Brandon over at Green Candles is also going to El Salvador.
Yep. Awesome, man. Sword's getting sharper every week now.
I need more reps, man. I need more reps.
You're getting roped in.
I need to get those
reps.
Right.
Take care, everyone. Have an awesome weekend. Thanks so much for watching. Give this video a like if you made it all the way to the end. Helps the algorithm find it. And yeah, take care, and I'll see you on the other side. Peace.